All right. That should just about do it. Hopefully the people that needed to know that the stream was starting have gotten the message that the stream is starting, and I can start the stream. Ah, frigadoodle, that's hot. Oh, it stings. Well, it burns, really. Oh, let me back out of Discord here so that it does not continuously make booblip, booblip, booblips. Actually, I'm going to hit deafen and see if that fixes it so I don't have to worry about it. No, not what I wanted to do. Not at all. Oh, well. Okay, so we're going to call it good at that. All right, that is enough of that jive. And let's get right down to it. So, previously on Neal Stephenson's Snow Crash, uh, let's see, Hiro protagonist was getting, and yes, that is his name, I swear. I'm not making that up. Hiro protagonist, Hiro. Uh, he was getting he's getting a history lesson, which kind of covers the kind of the background basis for the core conceit of the novel, for what's actually going on, the plot, if you will, giving the appropriate background on that. Related, of course, to all the uh, stuff about Enki, uh, religion, and brain programming of people. Um, let's see, what did YT do last? Oh, right, she did a drug deal. YT did a drug deal, and we were introduced or reintroduced to the rat things, which was a nice, sweet reunion. They're sweeties. Um, for more on them, I recommend some of the earlier installments of this series I've done. It's all available on my YouTube channel. Just look up Fragath, and it'll be there. Um, let's see. Where are we? Here we are. Okay, I'm at the right place. Let me just skim ahead here so that I have a logical stopping point. Okay, so our good friend YT is about to go to a place called Griffith Park. Let me get a little water in me here. Chapter 34. Any ped can get into Griffith Park without being noticed, and YT figures that despite the barriers across the road, the Falabala camp isn't too well protected if you've got off-road capability. For a skate ninja on a brand new plank in a brand new pair of night visions, hey, you have to spend money to make money, there will be no problem. Just find a high embankment that ramps down into the canyon, skirt the edge until you see those campfires down below, and then lean down that hill. Trust gravity. She realizes halfway down that her blue and orange coverall, fly as it may be, is going to be a real attention getter in the middle of the night in the Falabala zone. So she reaches up to her collar, feels a hard disc sewn into the fabric, presses it between thumb and finger until it clicks. Her coverall darkens. The colors shimmer through the electropigment like an oil slick, and then it's black. On her first visit, she didn't check this place out at all that carefully, because she hoped she'd never come back. So the embankment turns out to be taller and steeper than YT remembered. Maybe a little more of a cliff, drop-off, or abyss than she thought. Only thing that makes her think so is that she seems to be doing a lot of freefall work here. Major plummeting. Big-time ballistic styling. That's cool, it's all part of the job, she tells herself. The smart wheels are good for it. The tree trunks are bluish-black, standing out not so well against a blackish-blue background. The only other thing she can see is the red laser light of the digital speedometer down on the front of her plank, which is not showing any real information. The numbers have vibrated themselves into a cloud of gritty red light as the radar speed sensor tries to lock into something. She turns the speedometer off, running totally black now. Precipitating her way forward, the sweet creak of the creek bottom like a black angel who has just had the shroud lines of her celestial parachute severed by the Almighty. And when the wheels finally meet the pavement, it just about drives her knees up through her jawbone. She finishes the whole gravitational transaction with not much altitude and a nasty head of dark velocity. Mental note: next time, just jump off a fucking bridge. That way, there's no question of getting an invisible cholla shoved up your nose. She whips around a corner, heeled over so far she could lick the yellow line, and her night visions reveal all in a blaze of multispectral radiation. On infrared, the Falabala encampment is a turbulating aurora of pink fog, punctuated by the white-hot bursts of campfires. All of it rests on dim bluish pavement, which means, in the false color scheme of things, that it's cold. Behind everything is the jagged horizon line of that funky, improvised barrier technology that the Falabalas are so good at. A barrier that has been completely spurned, snubbed, and confounded by YT, who dropped out of the sky onto the middle of the camp, into the middle of the camp like a stealth fighter with an inferiority complex. Once you're into the actual encampment, people don't really notice or care who you are. Sorry. A couple people see her, watch her slide on by, don't get all hairy about it. They probably get a lot of couriers coming through here. A lot of dippy, gullible, Kool-Aid drinking couriers. And these people aren't hip enough to tell YT apart from that breed. But it's okay. She'll pass for now, as long as they don't check out the detailing on her new plank. The campfires provide enough plain old regular visible light to show this sorry affair for what it is. A bunch of demented Boy Scouts, a jamboree without merit badges or hygiene. With the IR supered on top of the visible, she can also see vague, spectral red faces out in the shadows where her unassisted eyes would only see darkness. These new night visions cost her a big wad of her mob drug running money. Just the kind of thing Mom had in mind when she insisted YT get a part-time job. Some of the people who were here last time are gone now, and there's a few new ones she doesn't recognize. There's a couple of people actually wearing duct tape straitjackets. That's a fashion statement reserved for the ones who are totally out of control, rolling and thrashing around on the ground. And there's a few more who are spazzing out, but not as bad, and one or two who are just plain messed up, like plain old derelicts that you might see at the snoozin' cruise. "Hey, look," someone says. "It's our friend the courier. Welcome, friend." She's got her liquid knuckles uncapped, available, and shaken well before use. She's got high voltage, high fashion metallic cuffs around her wrists in case someone tries to grab her by same, and a Bundy stunner up her sleeve. Only the most tubular throwbacks carry guns. Guns take a long time to work. You have to wait for the victim to bleed to death, but paradoxically, they end up killing people pretty often. But nobody hassles you after you've hit 'em with the Bundy stunner. That, at least that's what the ads say. So it's not like she exactly feels vulnerable or anything, but still, she'd like to pick her target. So she maintains escape velocity until she's found the woman who seemed friendly, the bald chick in the torn up Chanel knockoff, and then zeroes in on her.
Let's get off into the woods, man,
YT says.
I want to talk to you about what's going on with what's left of your brain.
The woman smiles, struggles to her feet with the good natured awkwardness of a retarded person in a good mood. I like to talk about that, she says, because I believe in it. YT doesn't stop to do a lot of talking, just grabs the woman by the hand, starts leading her uphill, into the scrubby little trees, away from the road. She doesn't see any pink faces lurking up here in the infrared. It ought to be safe. But there are a couple behind her, just ambling along pleasantly, not looking directly at her, like they just decided it was time to go for a stroll in the woods in the middle of the night. One of them is the High Priest. The woman's probably in her mid-20s. She's a tall, gangly type. Nice, but not good looking. Probably was a spunky but low-scoring forward on her high school basketball team. YT sits her down on a rock out in the darkness.
Do you have any idea where you are?
YT says. In the park, the woman says, with my friends. We're helping to spread the word.
How'd you get here?
From the Enterprise. That's where we go to learn things.
You mean like the raft? The Enterprise raft? Is that where you guys all came from?
I don't know where we came from, the woman says. Sometimes it's hard to remember stuff, but that's not important.
Where were you before? You didn't grow up on the raft, did you?
I was a systems programmer for Three-Verse Systems in Mountain View, California, the woman says, suddenly whipping off a string of perfect, normal-sounding English.
Then how did you get to be on the raft?
I don't know. My old life stopped. My new life started. Now I'm here. Back to baby talk.
What's the last thing you remember before your old life stopped?
I was working late. My computer was having problems.
That's it? That's the last normal thing that happened to you?
My system crashed, she said. I saw static, and then I became very sick. I went to the hospital, and there in the hospital I met a man who explained everything to me. He explained that I had been washed in the blood, that I belonged to the Word now, and suddenly it all made sense. And then I decided to go to the raft.
You decided, or someone decided for you?
I just wanted to. That's where we go.
Who else was on the raft with you?
More people like me.
Like you how?
All programmers, like me, who had seen the Word.
Seen it on their computers?
Yes, or sometimes on TV.
What did you do on the raft?
The woman pushes up one sleeve of her raggedy sweatshirt to expose a needle-pocked arm.
You took drugs?
No, we gave blood.
They sucked your blood out?
Yes, sometimes we would do a little coding, but only some of us.
How long have you been here?
I don't know. They move us around here when our veins don't work anymore. We just do things to help spread the word, drag stuff around, make barricades. But we don't really spend much time working. Most of the time we sing songs, pray, and tell other people about the word.
You want to leave? I can get you out of here.
No, the woman says, I've never been so happy.
How can you say that? You were a big-time hacker. Now you're kind of a dip, if I may speak frankly.
That's okay. It doesn't hurt my feelings. I wasn't really happy when I was a hacker. I never thought about the important things. God, heaven, the things of the spirit. It's hard to think about those things in America. You just put them aside. But those are really the important things, not programming computers or making money. Now, that's all I think about.
YT has been keeping an eye on the High Priest and his buddy. They keep moving closer, one step at a time. Now they're close enough that YT can smell their dinner. The woman puts her hand on YT's shoulder pad.
I want you to stay here with me. Won't you come down and have some refreshments? You must be thirsty.
Gotta run.
YT says, standing up.
I really have to object to that.
The High Priest says, stepping forward. He doesn't say it angrily. Now he's trying to be like YT's dad.
That's not really the right decision for you. What are you, a role model? That's okay. You don't have to agree. But let's go down and sit by the campfire and talk about it. Let's just get the fuck away from YT before she goes into a self-defense mode,
YT says. All three Falabalas step back away from her, very cooperative. The High Priest is holding up his hands, placating her.
I'm sorry if we made you feel threatened,
he says.
You guys just come on a little weird,
YT says, flipping her goggles back into infrared. In the infrared, she can see that the third Falabala, the one who came up here with the High Priest, is holding a small thing in one hand that is unusually warm. She nails him with her penlight, spotlighting his upper body in a narrow, yellow beam. Most of him is dirty and dun-colored, and reflects little light. But there is a brilliant glossy red thing, a shaft of ruby. It's a hypodermic needle. It's full of red fluid. Under infrared, it shows up warm. It's fresh blood. And she doesn't exactly get it, why these guys would be walking around with a syringe full of fresh blood. But she's seen enough. The liquid knuckles shoot out of the can in a long, narrow neon green stream, and when it nails the needle man in the face, he jerks his head back like he's just been axed across the bridge of the nose and falls back without making a sound. Then she gives the High Priest a shot of it for good measure. The woman just stands there, totally, appalled. YT pumps herself up out of the canyon so fast that when she flies out into traffic, she's going about as fast as it is. As soon as she gets a solid poon on a nocturnal lettuce tanker, she gets on the phone to Mom.
Mom, listen. No, Mom, never mind the roaring noise. Yes, I am riding my skateboard in traffic. But listen to me for a second, Mom.
She has to hang up on the old bitch. It's impossible to talk to her. Then she tries to make a voice link up with Hiro. That takes a couple of minutes to go through.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
She's shouting. And then she hears the honk of a car horn coming out of the telephone. Hello?
It's YT.
How are you doing? This guy always seems a little too laid back in his personal dealings. She doesn't really want to talk about how she's doing. She hears another honking horn in the background, behind Hiro's voice.
Where the hell are you, Hiro?
Walking down a street in L.A.
How can you be goggled in if you're walking down a street?
Then the terrible reality sinks in.
Oh my god, you didn't turn into a gargoyle, did you?
Well, Hiro says. He is hesitant, embarrassed, like it hadn't occurred to him yet that this was what he was doing. It's not exactly like being a gargoyle. Remember when you gave me shit about spending all my money on computer stuff?
Yeah.
I decided I wasn't spending enough. So I got a belt pack machine, smallest ever made. I'm walking down the street with this thing strapped to my belly. It's really cool.
You're a gargoyle.
Yeah, but it's not like having all this clunky shit strapped all over your body.
You're a gargoyle. Listen, I talked to one of these wholesalers.
Yeah?
She says she used to be a hacker. She saw something strange on her computer. Then she got sick for a while and joined this cult and ended up on the raft.
The raft? Do tell.
On the Enterprise, they take their blood, Hiro, suck it out of their bodies. They infect people by injecting them with the blood of sick hackers. And when their veins get all tracked out like a junkie's, they cut them loose and put them to work on the mainland running the wholesale operation.
That's good, he says. That's good stuff.
She says she saw some static on her computer screen and it made her sick. You know anything about that?
Yeah, it's true.
It's true?
Yeah, but you don't have to worry about it. It only affects hackers. For a minute, she can't even speak. She's so pissed.
My mother is a programmer for the feds. You asshole. Why didn't you warn me?
Half an hour later, she's there. Doesn't bother to change back into her wasp disguise this time. Just bursts into the house in basic bad black. Drops her plank on the floor on the way in. Grabs one of Mom's curios off the shelf. It's a heavy crystal award, clear plastic actually, that she got a couple of years ago for sucking up to her Fed boss and passing all her polygraph tests, and goes into the den. Mom's there, as usual, working on her computer. But she's not looking at the screen right now. She's got some notes on her lap that she's going through. Just as Mom is looking up at her, YT winds up and throws the crystal award. It goes right over Mom's shoulder, glances off the computer table, flies right through the picture tube. Awesome results. YT always wanted to do that. She pauses to admire her work for a few seconds while Mom just flames off all kinds of weird emotion. What are you doing in that uniform? Didn't I tell you not to ride your skateboard on a real street? You're not supposed to throw things in the house. That's my prized possession. Why did you break the computer? Government property. Just what is going on here anyway? YT can tell that this is going to continue for a couple of minutes, so she goes to the kitchen, splashes some water on her face, gets a glass of juice, just letting Mom follow her around and ventilate over her shoulder pads. Finally, Mom winds down, defeated by YT's strategy of silence.
I just saved your fucking life, Mom, YT says. You could at least offer me an Oreo.
What on earth are you talking about?
It's like if you, people of a certain age, would make some effort to just stay in touch with sort of basic modern day events, then your kids wouldn't have to take these drastic measures.
As you can see, YT is a special person. But she did kind of sort of probably just save her mom's life, maybe. She's reactionary. She's a product of her generation in this distant dystopic future. United States, where inflation has made it so that it costs quadrillions, literal quadrillions of dollars to do anything. Um, where the low glow glows and everything is burbclaves and franchises. Oh yes, and people are jacked into the internet with fancy VR goggles. Just the way we had always dreamed. Not quite how things are now, of course, but hey, baby steps. Also, where aggressive Aleuts can walk around, can motor around on motorcycles whose sidecars are actually nuclear torpedo warheads. Go Raven. I think we'll be encountering him this session again. Soon, if not soon. He's coming up. Raven's great, as anyone who's watched these before can attest. Otherwise, seriously get caught up on these. Raven is awesome. He's a terrifying, terrifying individual. All right, here we go. Chapter 35.
Earth materializes, rotating majestically in front of his face. Hiro reaches out and grabs it. He twists it around so he's looking at Oregon. Tells it to get rid of the clouds, and it does, giving him a crystalline view of the mountains and the seashore. Right out there, a couple of 100 miles off the Oregon coast, is a sort of granulated furuncle growing on the face of the water. Festering is not too strong a word. It is a couple of 100 miles south of Astoria now, moving south. Which explains why Juanita went to Astoria a couple days ago. She wanted to get close to the raft. Why is anyone's guess. Hiro looks up, focuses his gaze on Earth, zooms in for a look. As he gets closer, the imagery he's looking at shifts from the long-range pictures coming in from the geosynchronous satellites to the good stuff being spewed into the CIC computer from a whole fleet of low-flying spy birds. The view he's looking at is a mosaic of images shot no more than a few hours ago. It's several miles across. Its shape constantly changes, but at the time these pictures were shot, it had a kind of fat kidney shape. That is, it is trying to be a V, pointed southward like a flock of geese, but there's so much noise in the system, it's so amorphous and disorganized, that a kidney is the closest it can come. At the center is a pair of enormous vessels, the Enterprise and an oil tanker, lashed together side by side. These two behemoths are walled in by several other major vessels, an assortment of container ships and other freight carriers. The core. Everything else is pretty tiny. There is the occasional hijacked yacht or decommissioned fishing trawler, but most of the boats in the raft are just that, boats. Small pleasure craft, sampans, junks, dhows, dinghies, life rafts, houseboats, makeshift structures built on air-filled oil drums and slabs of styrofoam. A good 50% of it isn't real boat material at all, just a garble of ropes, cables, planks, nets, and other debris tied together on top of whatever kind of flotsam was handy. And L. Bob Reif is sitting in the middle of it. Hiro doesn't quite know what he's doing, and he doesn't know how Juanita is connected. But it's time to go there and find out. Scott Lagerquist is standing right on the edge of Mark Norman's 24/7 motorcycle mall, waiting when the man with the swords comes into view, striding down the sidewalk. A pedestrian is a peculiar sight in LA, considerably more peculiar than a man with swords. But a welcome one. Anyone who drives out to a motorcycle dealership already has a car, by definition, so it's hard to give them a really hard sell. A pedestrian should be cake. Scott Wilson Lagerquist, the guy yells from 50 feet away in closing. How you doing? Fabulous, Scott says. A little off guard, maybe. Can't remember this guy's name, which is a problem. Where has he seen this guy before? It's great to see you, Scott says, running forward and pumping the guy's hand. I haven't seen you since. Is Pinky here today? The guy says. Pinky? Yeah, Mark. Mark Norman. Pinky was his nickname back in college. I guess he probably doesn't like to be called that now that he's running, what, half a dozen dealerships, 3 McDonald's, and a Holiday Inn, huh? I didn't know that Mr. Norman was into fast food also. Yeah, he's got 3 franchises down around Long Beach. Owns them through a limited partnership, actually. Is he here today? No, he's on vacation. Oh, yeah, in Corsica. The Ajaccio Hyatt. Room 543. That's right, I completely forgot about that. Well, were you just stopping by to say hi, or... Nah, I was gonna buy a motorcycle. Oh, what kind of motorcycle were you looking for? One of the new Yamahas, with the new generation smart wheels? Scott grins manfully, trying to put the best face on the awful fact he is about to reveal. I know exactly the one you mean, but I'm sorry to tell you that we don't actually have one in stock today. You don't? We don't. It's a brand new model. Nobody has them. You sure? Because you ordered one. We did? Yeah, a month ago. Suddenly, the guy cranes his neck, looks over Scott's shoulder down the boulevard. Well, speak of the devil, here it comes. A Yamaha semi is pulling into the truck entrance with a new shipment of motorcycles in the back. It's on that truck, the guy says. If you can give me one of your cards, I'll jot down the vehicle identification number on back so you can pull it off the truck for me.
This was a special order made by Mr. Norman?
He claimed he was just ordering it as a display model, you know, but it sort of has my name on it.
Yes, sir, I understand totally.
Sure enough, the bike comes off the truck, just as the guy described it, right down to the color scheme, black, and vehicle ID number. It's a beautiful bike. It draws a crowd just sitting on the parking lot. The other salesmen actually put down their coffee cups and take their feet off their desks to go outside and look at it. It looks like a black land torpedo. Two-wheel drive, natch. The wheels are so advanced they're not even wheels. They look like giant, heavy-duty versions of the smart wheels that high-speed skateboards use, independently telescoping spokes with fat traction pads on the ends. Dangling out over the front, the nose cone of the motorcycle, is the sensor package that monitors road conditions, decides where to place each spoke as it rolls forward, how much to extend it, and how to rotate the footpad for maximum traction. It's all controlled by a BIOS, a built-in operating system, an onboard computer with a flat panel screen built into the top of the fuel tank. They say that this baby will do 120 miles per hour on rubble. The BIOS patches itself into the CIC weather net so that it knows when it's about to run into precip. The aerodynamic cowling is totally flexible, calculates its own most efficient shape for the current speed and wind conditions, changes its curves accordingly, wraps around you like a nymphomaniacal gymnast. Scott figures this guy is going to waltz off with this thing for dealer invoice, being a friend and confidant of Mr. Norman. And it's not an easy thing for any red-blooded salesman to write out a contract to sell a sexy beast like this one at dealer invoice. He hesitates for a minute, wonders what's going to happen to him if this is all some kind of mistake. The guy's watching him intently, seems to sense his nervousness, almost as if he can hear Scott's heart beating. So, at the last minute, he eases up, gets magnanimous. Scott loves these big spender types, decides to throw in a few hundred Kong bucks over invoice, just so Scott can pull in a meager commission on the deal. A tip, basically. Then, icing on the cake, the guy goes nuts in the cycle shop. Totally berserk. Buys a complete outfit. Everything. Top of the line. A full black coverall that swaddles everything from toes to neck in breathable, bulletproof fabric, with armor gel pads in all the right places and airbags around the neck. Even safety fanatics don't bother with a helmet when they're wearing one of these babies. So, once he's figured out how to attach his swords on the outside of his coverall, he's on his way. I gotta say this, Scott says as the guy is sitting on his new bike, getting his swords adjusted, doing something incredibly unauthorized to the BIOS. You look like one bad motherfucker. Thanks, I guess. He twists the throttle up once, and Scott feels, but does not hear, the power of the engine. This baby is so efficient, it doesn't waste power by making noise. Say hi to your brand new niece, the guy says, and then lets go the clutch. The spokes flex and gather themselves, and the bike springs forward out of the lot, seeming to jump off its electric paws. He cuts right across the parking lot of the neighboring Neo-Aquarian Temple franchise and pulls out into the road. About half a second later, the guy with the swords is a dot on the horizon. Then he's gone. Northbound. So, what just happened in that particular transaction was Hero Protagonist, now kitted out with fancy, sleek gargoyle gear. Uh, Gargoyles in the world of Snow Crash being people who have strapped themselves into these big collections of sensors and are permanently hooked into the internet, constantly getting feedback and data. So what's going on Hero's perspective is he's got like a VR goggles or contact lenses or something, and he's seeing all this and pulling up all this information on people on the fly. So that's why he acted sort of like a sorcerer or magician, which is kind of the point, and maybe a little on the nose related to some of the stuff that's happened previously in terms of the history lesson, if you will, earlier, which anybody tuning in for the first time now is not going to get, but that's why you watch the previous ones. They're all archived um, and viewable. And now he's got himself kitted out to look like one bad motherfucker, and he is boosting on his newly acquired super motorcycle on up and along to Oregon. Chapter 36. Until a man is 25, he still thinks, every so often, that under the right circumstances he could be the baddest motherfucker in the world. If I moved to a martial arts monastery in China and studied real hard for 10 years, if my family was wiped out by Colombian drug dealers and I swore myself to revenge, if I got a fatal disease, had 1 year to live, devoted it to wiping out street crime, if I just dropped out and devoted my life to being bad. Hiro used to feel that way too, but then he ran into Raven. In a way, this is liberating. He no longer has to worry about trying to be the baddest motherfucker in the world. The position is taken. The crowning touch, the one thing that really puts true world-class bad motherfuckerdom totally out of reach, of course, is the hydrogen bomb. If it wasn't for the hydrogen bomb, a man could still aspire. Maybe find Raven's Achilles heel. Sneak up, get a drop, slip a Mickey, pull a fast one. But Raven's nuclear umbrella kind of puts the world title right out of reach. Which is okay. Sometimes it's all right just to be a little bad, to know your limitations, make do with what you've got. Once he maneuvers his way onto the freeway, aimed up into the mountains, he goggles into his office. Earth is still there, zoomed in tight on the raft. Hiro contemplates it, superimposed in ghostly hues on his view of the highway as he rides towards Oregon at 140 miles per hour. From a distance, it looks bigger than it really is. Getting closer, he can see that this illusion is caused by an enveloping, self-made slick/cloud of sewage and air pollution, fading out into the ocean and the atmosphere. It orbits the Pacific clockwise. When they fire up the boilers on the Enterprise, it can control its direction a little bit, but real navigation is a practical impossibility with all the other shit lashed to it. It mostly has to go where the wind and the Coriolis effect take it. A couple of years ago, it was going by the Philippines, Vietnam, China, Siberia, picking up refuse. Then it swung up into the Aleutian chain, down the Alaska Panhandle, and now it's gliding past the small town of Port Sherman, Oregon, near the California border. As the raft moves through the Pacific, riding mostly on ocean currents, it occasionally sheds great hunks of itself. Eventually, these fragments wash up in some place like Santa Barbara, still lashed together, carrying a payload of skeletons and gnawed bones. When it gets to California, it will enter a new phase of its life cycle. It will shed much of its sprawling improvised bulk as a few 100,000 refuse cut themselves loose and paddle to shore. The only refuse who make it that far are, by definition, the ones who are agile enough to make it out to the raft in the first place, resourceful enough to survive the agonizingly slow passage through the Arctic waters, and tough enough not to get killed by any of the other refuse. Nice guys, all of them. Just the kind of people you'd like to have showing up on your private beach in groups of a few thousand. Stripped down to a few major ships, a little more maneuverable, the Enterprise will swing across the South Pacific, heading for Indonesia, where it will turn north again and start the next cycle of migration. Army ants cross mighty rivers by climbing on top of each other and clustering together into a little ball that floats. Many of them fall off and sink, and naturally the ants on the bottom of the ball drown. The ones who are quick and vigorous enough to keep clawing their way to the top survive. A lot of them make it across, and that's why you can't stop army ants by dynamiting the bridges. That's how refuse come across the Pacific, even though they are too poor to book passage on a real ship or buy a seaworthy boat. A new wave washes up onto the west coast every 5 years or so, when the ocean currents bring the Enterprise back. For the last couple of months, owners of beachfront property in California have been hiring security people, putting up spotlights and anti-personnel fences along the tide line, mounting machine guns on their yachts. They have all subscribed to CIC's 24-hour raft report, getting the latest news flash straight from the satellite on when the latest contingent of 25,000 starving Eurasians has cut itself loose from the Enterprise and started dipping its myriad oars into the Pacific like ant legs. Time to do more digging, he tells the librarian. But this is going to have to be totally verbal, because I'm headed up I-5 at some incredible speed right now, and I have to watch out for slow-moving bagos and stuff. I'll keep that in mind, the voice of the librarian says into his earphones. Look out for the jackknife truck south of Santa Clarita, and there is a large chuck hole in the left lane near the Tulare exit. Thanks. Who were these gods, anyway? Did Lagos have an opinion on that? Lagos believed that they might have been magicians, that is, normal human beings with special powers, or they might have been aliens. Whoa, hold on. Let's take these one at a time. What did Lagos mean when he talked about normal human beings with special powers? Assume that the Nam-Shub of Enki really functioned as a virus. Assume that someone named Enki invented it. Then Enki must have had some kind of linguistic power that goes beyond our concept of normal. And how would this power work? What's the mechanism? I can only give you forward references drawn by Lagos. Okay, give me some. The belief in the magical power of language is not unusual, both in mystical and academic literature. The Kabbalists, Jewish mystics of Spain and Palestine, believe that supernormal insight and power could be derived from properly combining the letters of the divine name. For example, Abu Aharon, an early Kabbalist who emigrated from Baghdad to Italy, was said to perform miracles through the power of the sacred names. What kind of power are we talking about here? Most Kabbalists were theorists who were interested only in pure meditation, but there were so-called practical Kabbalists who tried to apply the power of the Kabbalah in everyday life. In other words, sorcerers. Yes, these practical Kabbalists used a so-called archangelic alphabet, derived from 1st century Greek and Aramaic theurgic alphabets, which resembled cuneiform. The Kabbalists referred to this alphabet as eye writing, because the letters were composed of lines and small circles, which resembled eyes. Ones and zeros. Some Kabbalists divided up the letters of the alphabet according to where they were produced inside the mouth. Okay, so as we would think of it, they were drawing a connection between the printed letter on the page and the neural connections that had to be invoked in order to pronounce it. Yes, by analyzing the spelling of various words, they were able to draw what they thought were profound conclusions about their true inner meaning and significance. Okay, if you say so.
In the academic realm, the literature is naturally not as fanciful, but a great deal of effort has been devoted to explaining Babel. Not the Babel event, which most people consider to be a myth, but the fact that languages tend to diverge. A number of linguistic theories have been developed in an effort to tie all languages together. Theories Lagos tried to apply to his virus hypothesis. Yes, there are two schools, relativists and universalists. As George Steiner summarizes it, relativists tend to believe that language is not the vehicle of thought, but its determining medium. It is the framework of cognition. Our perceptions of everything are organized by the flux of sensations passing over that framework. Hence, the study of the evolution of language is the study of the evolution of the human mind itself. Okay, I can see the significance of that. What about the universalists? In contrast with the relativists, who believe that languages need not have anything in common with each other, the universalists believe that if you can analyze languages enough, you can find that all of them have certain traits in common. So they analyze languages, looking for such traits. Have they found any? No, there seems to be an exception to every rule, which blows universalism out of the water. Not necessarily. They explain this problem by saying that the shared traits are too deeply buried to be analyzable, which is a cop-out. Their point is that, at some level, language has to happen inside the human brain. Since all human brains are more or less the same, the hardware is the same, not the software. You are using some kind of metaphor that I cannot understand. Hiro whips past a big airstream that is rocking from side to side in a dangerous wind coming down the valley. Well, a French speaker's brain starts out the same as an English speaker's brain. As they grow up, they get programmed with different software. They learn different languages. Yes, therefore, according to the universalists, French and English, or any other languages, must share certain traits that have their roots in deep structures of the human brain. According to Chomskyan theory, the deep structures are innate components of the brain that enable it to carry out certain formal kinds of operations on strings of symbols. Or, as Steiner paraphrases Imon Bach, these deep structures eventually lead to the actual patterning of the cortex, with its immensely ramified, yet at the same time programmed network of electrochemical and neurophysiological channels. But these deep structures are so deep we can't even see them? The universalists place the active nodes of linguistic life, the deep structures, so deep as to defy observation and description. Or, to use Steiner's analogy, try to draw up the creature from the depths of the sea, and it will disintegrate or change form grotesquely. There's that serpent again. So which theory did Lagos believe in, the relativist or the universalist? He did not seem to think there was much of a difference. In the end, they are both somewhat mystical. Lagos believed that both schools of thought had essentially arrived at the same place by different lines of reasoning. But it seems to me there is a key difference, Hiro says. The universalists seem to think that we're determined by the pre-patterned structure of our brains, the pathways in the cortex. The relativists don't believe that we have any limits. Lagos modified the strict Chomskyan theory by supposing that learning a language is like blowing code into PROMs, an analogy that I cannot interpret. The analogy is clear. PROMs are programmable read-only memory chips, Hiro says. When they come from the factory, they have no content. Once and only once, you can place information into those chips and then freeze it. The information, the software, becomes frozen into the chip. It transmutes into hardware. After you have blown the code into the PROMs, you can read it out, but you can't write to them anymore. So, Lagos was trying to say that the newborn human brain has no structure, as the relativists would have it, and that as the child learns a language, the developing brain structures itself accordingly. The language gets blown into the hardware and becomes a permanent part of the brain's deep structure, as the universalists would have it. Yes, this was his interpretation. Okay, so
When he talked about Enki being a real person with magical powers, what he meant was that Enki somehow understood the connection between language and the brain, knew how to manipulate it. The same way that a hacker, knowing the secrets of a computer system, can write code to control it. Digital Nam-Shubs. Lagos said that Enki had the ability to ascend into the universe of language and see it before his eyes, much as humans go into the metaverse. That gave him power to create Nam-Shubs, and Nam-Shubs had the power to alter the functioning of the brain and of the body. Why isn't anyone doing this kind of thing nowadays? Why aren't there any Nam-Shubs in English? Not all languages are the same, as Steiner points out. Some languages are better at metaphor than others. Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, and Chinese lend themselves to wordplay and have achieved a lasting grip on reality. Palestine had Kirat Sefer, the city of the letter, and Syria had Byblos, the town of the book. By contrast, other civilizations seem speechless, or at least, as may have been the case in Egypt, not entirely cognizant of the creative and transformational powers of language. Lagos believed that Sumerian was an extraordinarily powerful language, at least it was in Sumer 5,000 years ago. A language that lent itself to Enki's neurolinguistic hacking. Early linguists, as well as the Kabbalists, believed in a fictional language called the Tongue of Eden, the language of Adam. It enabled all men to understand each other, to communicate without misunderstanding. It was the language of the Logos, the moment when God created the world by speaking a word. In the Tongue of Eden, naming a thing was the same as creating it. To quote Steiner again, our speech interposes itself between apprehension and truth like a dusty pane or warped mirror. The tongue of Eden was like a flawless glass. A light of total understanding streamed through it. Thus Babel was a second fall. And Isaac the Blind, an early Kabbalist, said that, to quote Gershom Scholem's translation, the speech of men is connected with divine speech, and all language, whether heavenly or human, derives from one source, the divine name. The practical Kabbalists, the sorcerers, bore the title Baal Shem, meaning master of the divine name. The machine language of the world, Hiro says. Is this another analogy? Computers speak machine language, Hiro says. It's written in ones and zeros, binary code. At the lowest level, all computers are programmed with strings of ones and zeros. When you program in machine language, you are controlling the computer at its brainstem, the root of its existence. It's the tongue of Eden. But it's very difficult to work in machine language because you go crazy after a while, working at such a minute level. So a whole Babel of computer languages has been created for programmers. Fortran, Basic, COBOL, Lisp, Pascal, C, Prolog, Forth. You talk to the computer in one of these languages, and a piece of software called a compiler converts it into machine language. But you never can tell exactly what the compiler is doing. It doesn't always come out the way you want, like a dusty pane or warped mirror. A really advanced hacker comes to understand the true inner workings of the machine. He sees through the language he's working in and glimpses the secret functioning of the binary code. Becomes a Baal Shem of sorts. Lagos believed that the legends about the Tongue of Eden were exaggerated versions of true events, the librarian says. These legends reflected nostalgia for a time when people spoke Sumerian, a tongue that was superior to anything that came afterward. Is Sumerian really that good? Not as far as modern-day linguists can tell, the librarian says. As I mentioned, it is largely impossible for us to grasp. Lagos suspected that words worked differently in those days. If one's native tongue influences the physical structure of the developing brain, then it is fair to say that the Sumerians, who spoke a language radically different from anything in existence today, had fundamentally different brains from yours. Lagos believed that for this reason, Sumerian was a language ideally suited to the creation and propagation of viruses. That a virus, once released into Sumer, would spread rapidly and virulently,
until it had infected everyone. Maybe Enki knew that also, Hiro says. Maybe the Nam-Shub of Enki wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe Babel was the best thing that ever happened to us. Oh, yeah, we are getting right into the core conceit of the book. The basic concept. The thing that's making the plot go. It's also where all the interesting stuff that ties into Julian Jaynes's on the origin of consciousness in the breakdown of the bicameral mind. Oh, God, try saying that 5 times fast. Really comes into play uh, because it's talking about kind of the inherent programmability of the human brain. And a lot of that book by Julian Jaynes is very much dealing with that idea. The question of, where and how does the human consciousness work, and how is what it, it's how bogus it is in many regards. Um, how is it in any way an advantage? And in some ways, maybe it is, but I mean, like, numerous examples abound. Like driving a car, most of the time it's pretty autonomous. You kind of just space out and you just get from point A to point B because your muscle memory and brain memory are just doing it for you. You're not having to consciously say, I'm going to turn the wheel left 3 degrees. I'm going to depress the accelerator by another couple pounds per square inch. I'm going to hit the brake very lightly. You're not having to consciously do that. Your body's just kind of receiving input and doing it. And you're just kind of, your consciousness is kind of just riding there. It gets a little, I mean, it's sort of philosophical. What's the nature of man, sort of thing. Um, but this is really getting it, starting to get into that in this book. This is a theme that I guess I've been working with throughout this past year. Um, is the nature of what we are. I will probably keep going with that because it's kind of universal to certain kinds of good sci-fi. Um, for what it's worth, and I'm not stopping here. I'm just gonna doing a little minor break to get myself back in the zone. I do not know what book I'm going to read next as a mini series within this series. I'm probably going to, for the next however long, be doing short stories again because those are easy and fun. A lot of them are fun. Part of me, after reading this, wants to do William Gibson's Neuromancer because that's another classic cyberpunk novel. So important. If you haven't read that and you like cyberpunk as a genre, that one is just kind of nails down so much of what makes it great. Failing that, I might do some Frank Herbert because I've been wanting to do that as well, or C.J. Sherry. I haven't decided yet. Um, but in any case, thoughts going through my head. The thoughts. Alrighty, let's get back on track here. Chapter 37. YT's mom works in Fedland. She has parked her little car in her own little numbered slot, for which the feds require her to pay about 10% of her salary. If she doesn't like it, she can take a taxi or walk, and walked up several levels of a blindingly lit, reinforced concrete helix in which most of the spaces, the good spaces closer to the surface, are reserved for people other than her, but empty. She always walks up the center of the ramp, between the rows of parked cars, so that the Ebgok boys won't think she's lurking, loitering, skulking, malingering, or smoking. Reaching the subterranean entrance of her building, she has taken all metal objects from her pockets and removed what little jewelry she's wearing and dumped them into a dirty plastic bowl and walked through the detector. flashed her badge, signed her name, and noted down the digital time. Submitted to a frisking from an EBGOC girl. Annoying, but it sure beats a cavity search. They have a right to do a cavity search if they want. She got cavity searched every day for a month once, right after she had spoken up at a meeting and suggested that her supervisor might be on the wrong track with a major programming project. It was punitive and vicious. She knew it was, but she always wanted to give something back to her country, and whenever you work for the feds, you just accept the fact that there's going to be some politicking. And that as a low-level person, you're going to bear the brunt. And later on, you climb the GS ladder, you don't have to put up with as much shit. Far be it from her to quarrel with her supervisor. Her supervisor, Marietta, doesn't have an especially stellar GS level. But she does have access. She has connections. Marietta knows people who know people. Marietta has attended cocktail parties that were also attended by some people who, well, your eyes would bug out. She has passed the frisking with flying collars. Collars, not colors? Put the metal stuff back into her pockets. Climbed up half a dozen flights of stairs to her floor. The elevators here still work, but some very highly placed people in Fedland have let it be known, nothing official, but they have ways of letting this stuff out, that it is a duty to conserve energy. And the feds are real serious about duty. Duty, loyalty, responsibility. The collagen that binds us into the United States of America. So the stairwells are filled with sweaty wool and clacking leather. If you took the elevator, no one would actually say anything, but it would be noticed. Noticed and written down and taken into account. People would look at you, glance you up and down, like, what happened? Sprain your ankle? Taking the stairs is no problem. Feds don't smoke. Feds generally don't overeat. The health plan is very specific, contains major incentives. Get too heavy or wheezy, and no one says anything about it, which would be rude. But you feel a definite pressure, a sense of not fitting in, as you walk across the sea of desks. Eyes glance up to follow you, estimating the mass of your saddlebags. Eyes darting back and forth between desks as, by consensus, your coworkers say to themselves, I wonder how much he or she is driving up our health plan premiums. So, YT's mom has clacked up the stairs in her black pumps and gone into her office, actually a large room with computer workstations placed across it in a grid. Used to be divided up by partitions, but the Ebgok boys didn't like it. Said what would happen if there had to be an evacuation? All those partitions would impede the free flow of unhinged panic. So, no more partitions. Just workstations and chairs. Not even any desktops. Desktops encourage the use of paper, which is archaic and reflects inadequate team spirit. What is so special about your work that you have to write it down on a piece of paper that only you get to see? That you have to lock it away inside a desk? When you're working for the feds, everything you do is the property of the United States of America. You do your work on the computer. The computer keeps a copy of everything, so that if you get sick or something, it's all there when your coworkers and supervisors can get access to it. If you want to write little notes or make phone doodles, you're perfectly free to do that at home, in your spare time. And there's the question of interchangeability. Fed workers, like military people, are intended to be interchangeable parts. What happens if your workstation should break down? You're going to sit there and twiddle your thumbs until it gets fixed? No siree, you're going to move to a spare workstation and get to work on that. And you don't have that flexibility if you've got a ton of personal stuff cached inside of a desk, strewn around a desktop. So, there is no paper in a Fed office. All the workstations are the same. You come in the morning, pick one at random, sit down, and get to work. You could try to favor a particular station, try to sit there every day, but it would be noticed. Generally, you pick the unoccupied workstation that's closest to the door. That way, whoever came in earliest sits closest. Whoever came in latest is way in the back. For the rest of the day, it's obvious at a glance who's on the ball in this office and who is, as they whisper to each other in the bathrooms, having problems. Not that it's any big secret who comes in first. When you sign on to a workstation in the morning, it's not like the central computer doesn't notice that fact. The central computer notices just about everything. It keeps track of every key you hit on the keyboard all day long, what time you hit it, down to the microsecond, whether it was the right key or the wrong key, how many mistakes you make, and when you make them. You're only required to be at your workstation from 8 to 5, with a half-hour lunch break and two 10-minute coffee breaks. But if you stuck to that schedule, it would definitely be noticed, which is why YT's mom is sliding into the first unoccupied workstation and signing on to her machine, at quarter to 7. Half a dozen other people are already here, signed on to workstations closer to the entrance, but this isn't bad. She can look forward to a reasonably stable career if she can keep up this sort of performance. The feds still operate in Flatland. None of this three-dimensional stuff, no goggles, no stereo sound. The computers are all basic flat-screen two-dimensional numbers. Windows appear on the desktop with little text documents inside, all part of the austerity program, soon to reap major benefits. She signs on and checks her mail. No personal mail, just a couple of mass-distributed pronouncements from Marietta. New TP pool regulations. I've been asked to distribute the new regulations regarding office pool displays. The enclosed memo is a new subchapter of EBGOC Procedure Manual, replacing the old subchapter entitled Physical Plant California Los Angeles Buildings Office Areas Physical Layout Regulations Employee Input Group Activities. The old subchapter was a flat prohibition on the use of office space or time for pool activities of any kind, whether permanent, ergo coffee pool, or one time, ergo birthday parties. E.g., sorry, not ergo, I misread. E.g., coffee pool, or one time, e.g., birthday parties. This prohibition still applies, but a single one-time exception has now been made for any office that wishes to pursue a joint bathroom tissue strategy. By way of introduction, let me just make a few general comments on this subject. The program of distributing bathroom tissue to workers presents inherent challenges for any office management system due to the inherent unpredictability of usage. Not every facility usage transaction necessitates the use of bathroom tissue, and when it is used, the amount needed, number of squares, may vary quite widely from person to person, and, for a given person, from one transaction to the next. This does not even take into account the occasional use of bathroom tissue for unpredictable/creative purposes, such as applying/removing cosmetics, beverage spill management, etc. For this reason, rather than trying to package bathroom tissue in small one-transaction packets, as is done with pre-moistened towelettes, for example, which can be wasteful in some cases and limiting in other cases, it has been traditional to package this product in bulk distribution units whose size exceeds the maximum amount of squares that an individual could conceivably use in a single transaction, barring force majeure. This reduces to a minimum the number of transactions in which the distribution unit is depleted, the roll runs out, during the transaction, a situation that can lead to emotional stress for the affected employee. However, it does present the manager with some challenges in that the distribution unit is rather bulky and must be repeatedly used by a number of different individuals if it is not to be wasted. Since the implementation of Phase 17 of the austerity program, employees have been allowed to bring in their own bathroom tissue from home. This approach is somewhat bulky and redundant, as every worker usually brings their own roll. Some offices have attempted to meet this challenge by instituting bathroom tissue pools, Without overgeneralizing, it may be stated that an inherent and irreducible feature of any bathroom tissue pool implemented at the office level in an environment, i.e., building, in which comfort stations are distributed on a per-floor basis, i.e., in which several offices share a single facility, is that provision must be made within the confines of the individual office for temporary stationing of bathroom tissue distribution units, i.e., rolls. Oh boy. This follows from the fact that if the BTDUs, roles, are stationed, while inactive, outside of the purview of the controlling office, i.e., the office that has collectively purchased the BTDU, that is, if the BTDUs are stored, for example, in a lobby area or within the facility in which they are actually utilized, they will be subject to pilferage and shrinkage, as unauthorized persons consume them, either as part of a conscious effort to pilfer or out of an honest misunderstanding, i.e., a belief that the BTDUs are being provided free of charge by the operating agency, in this case the United States government, or as the result of necessity, as in the case of a beverage spill that is encroaching on sensitive electronic equipment and whose management will thus brook no delay. This fact has led certain offices, which shall go unnamed, you know who you are, guys, to establish makeshift BTDU depots that also serve as pool contribution collection points. Usually, these depots take the form of a table near the door closest to the facility on which the BTDUs are stacked or otherwise deployed, with a bowl or some other receptacle in which the participants may place their contributions, and typically with a sign or other attention-getting device, such as a stuffed animal or cartoon, requesting donations. A quick glance at the current regulations will show that the placement of such a display/depot violates the procedure manual. However, in the interests of employee hygiene, morale, and group spirit building, my higher-ups have agreed to make a one-time exception in the regulations for this purpose. Oh, buddy. As with any part of the procedure manual, new or old, it is your responsibility to be thoroughly familiar with this material. Estimated reading time for this document is 15.62 minutes, and don't think we won't check. Please make note of the major points made in this document as follows, and oh yeah, we're going there. 1. BTDU depot/displays are now allowed on a trial basis, with the new policy to be reviewed in 6 months. 2. These must be operated on a voluntary pool-type basis, as described in the subchapter on employee pools. Note, this means keeping books and tallying all financial transactions. 3. BTDUs must be brought in by the employees, not shipped through the mailroom, and are subject to all the usual search and seizure regulations. 4. Scented bathroom tissue distribution units are prohibited, as they may cause allergic reactions, wheezing, etc. in some persons. 5. Cash pool donations, as with all monetary transactions within the U.S. government, must use official U.S. currency, no yen or Kong bucks. Naturally, this will lead to a bulk problem if people try to use the donation bucket as a dumping ground for bundles of old billion and trillion-dollar bills. The buildings and grounds people are worried about waste disposal problems and the potential fire hazard that may ensue if large piles of billions and trillions begin to mount up. Therefore, a key feature of the new regulation is that the donation bucket must be emptied every day, more often if an excessive buildup situation is seen to develop. In this vein, the B and G people would like me to point out that many of you who have excess U.S. currency to get rid of have been trying to kill two birds with one stone by using old billions as bathroom tissue. While creative, this approach has two drawbacks. 1. It clogs the plumbing, and 2. It constitutes defacement of U.S. currency,
which is a federal crime. Don't do it. Join your office bathroom tissue pool instead. It's easy, it's hygienic, and it's legal. Happy pooling, Marietta.
YT's mom pulls up the new memo, checks the time, and starts reading it. The estimated reading time is 15.62 minutes. Later, when Marietta does her end-of-day statistical roundup, sitting in her private office at 9 o'clock p.m., she will see the name of each employee and, next to it, the amount of time spent reading this memo, and her reaction, based on the time spent, will go something like this. Less than 10 minutes, time for an employee conference and possible attitude counseling. 10 to 14 minutes, keep an eye on this employee, may be developing slipshod attitude. 14 to 15.61 minutes, employee is an efficient worker, may sometimes miss important details. Exactly 15.62 minutes, smartass, needs attitude counseling. 15.63 to 16 minutes, asswipe, not to be trusted. 16 to 18 minutes, employee is a methodical worker, may sometimes get hung up on minor details. And more than 18 minutes, check the security videotape just to see what this employee was up to, e.g., possible unauthorized restroom break. YT's mom decides to spend between 14 and 15 minutes reading the memo. It's better for younger workers to spend too long to show that they're careful, not cocky. It's better for older workers to go a little fast to show good management potential. She's pushing 40. She scans through the memo, hitting the page down button at reasonably regular intervals, occasionally paging back up to pretend to reread some earlier section. The computer is going to notice all this. It approves of rereading. It's a small thing, but over a decade or so, this stuff really shows up on your work habits summary. Having got that out of the way, she dives into work. She is an applications programmer for the feds. In the old days, she would have written computer programs for a living. Nowadays, she writes fragments of computer programs. These programs are designed by Marietta and Marietta's superiors in massive week-long meetings on the top floor. Once they get the design down, they start breaking up the problem into tinier and tinier segments, assigning them to group managers who break them down even more and feed little bits of work to the individual programmers. In order to keep the work done by the individual coders from colliding, it all has to be done according to a set of rules and regulations even bigger and more fluid than the government procedure manual. So, the first thing that YT's mother does, having read the new subchapter on bathroom tissue pools, is to sign on to a subsystem of the main computer system that handles the particular programming project she's working on. She doesn't know what the project is, that's classified, or what it's called. It's just her project. She shares it with a few hundred other programmers, she's not sure exactly who. And every day when she signs on to it, there's a stack of memos waiting for her, containing new regulations and changes to the rules that they all have to follow when writing code for the project. These regulations make the business with the bathroom tissue seem as simple and elegant as the Ten Commandments. So, she spends until about 11 a.m. reading, rereading, and understanding the new changes in the project. There are many of these, because this is a Monday morning, and Marietta and her higher-ups spent a whole weekend closeted on the top floor, having a catfight about this project, changing everything. Then she starts going back over all the code she has previously written for the project, and making a list of all the stuff that will have to be rewritten in order to make it compatible with the new specifications. Basically, she's going to have to rewrite all of her material from the ground up, for the third time in as many months. But hey, it's a job. About 11:30, she looks up, startled, to see that half a dozen people are standing around her workstation. There's Marietta, and a proctor, and some male feds, and Leon the polygraph man.
I just had mine on Thursday, she says. Time for another one, Marietta says. Come on, let's get this show on the road.
Hands out where I can see them, the proctor says. Uh-oh. What is YT's mom gonna do? Mm. Just getting some additional water in me. Now I'm dripping. This is not the ideal situation. There we go. Okay. So, as you can see, Fedland is basically bureaucracy run horribly, horribly, horribly amok. Complete free reign. Oh, excuse me. I got a hack of coffee here a sec. Eey, sorry about that. Terribly, terribly run amok. Lots of bureaucracy. But it's the not too distant future. I love that memo. That memo is classy. I also love the previous chapter with the or the chapter before that chapter. 2 chapters ago. There we go. With the talking about bad motherfuckerdom. In fact, I'm gonna reread that one because it's hilarious. I think. Until a man is 25, he still thinks, every so often, that under the right circumstances he could be the baddest motherfucker in the world. If I moved to a martial arts monastery in China and studied real hard for 10 years, if my family was wiped out by Colombian drug dealers and I swore myself to revenge, if I got a fatal disease, had 1 year to live, devoted it to wiping out street crime, if I just dropped out and devoted my life to being bad. Hiro used to feel that way too, but then he ran into Raven. In a way, this is liberating. He no longer has to worry about trying to be the baddest motherfucker in the world. The position is taken. The crowning touch, the one thing that really puts true world-class bad motherfuckerdom totally out of reach, of course, is the hydrogen bomb. If it wasn't for the hydrogen bomb, a man could still aspire. Maybe find Raven's Achilles heel, sneak up, get a drop, slip a Mickey, pull a fast one. But Raven's nuclear umbrella kind of puts the world title out of reach, which is okay. Sometimes it's all right to just be a little bad, to know your limitations, make do with what you've got. Ah, I love that. In fact, I'm going to put a bookmark there just so I can reread that like every time I do this. I love it. I love it. I love it. It fills me with happiness, joy, and a warm, fuzzy feeling that can only be known by the term contentment. Oy. Oh man, threatened to start coughing and spluttering all over again. And I do not want to do that. No, siree, Bob. Let's get this done here. I need to cough again. Give me a sec. Okay, I'm getting a cough drop. Give me 10 seconds. And we're back. Sorry about that delay. Speaking around this thing is going to be an interesting process. This thing, of course, being the cough drop. Sorry. I have to flip back to my page here. All right. Also looking at my messages. I really wish I had a timestamp on these. Punkbuster28 watching now. Thanks. I'll need to check out the others so I follow it. Yes. Yes. This is, of course, if you're just tuning in now for the first time, it is right in the middle of things, and this book is relentless. It does not do much calling back. It just, or re-explaining things. It's just, it's rolling with it. It's a book. It's a novel. Most novels tend not to go and re-explain things over and over. They tend to just drop it on your head and then keep going. Oh, you know what I could do? Oh man, that'd be a tough one. But read like Yukikaze or Good Luck Yukikaze. Those are, oh gosh, those are trippy. I highly recommend them. We will probably never get the third book translated in English at this rate. But hey, who knows? I forget the name of the publishing house that's doing those. It's not Del Rey. I think it's something else. It's like an actual Asian name, but I can't remember what it is. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Let's move on here. I want to get to like chapter 40. How much time do we got? Oh, it's I got like half an hour to read quite a bit. I think I can do it though. I don't have a too many pages. All right. All right, let's get going. Chapter 38. YT's mom stands up, hands to her sides, and starts walking. She walks straight out of the office. None of the other people look up. Not supposed to. Insensitive to coworkers' needs. Makes the testee feel awkward and singled out, when in fact the polygraph is just part of the whole Fed way of life. She can hear the snapping footsteps of the proctor behind her, walking 2 paces behind, watching, keeping her eyes on those hands so they can't be doing anything, like popping a Valium or something else that might throw off the test. She stops in front of the bathroom door. The proctor walks in front of her, holds it open, and she walks in, followed by the proctor. The last stall on the left is oversized, big enough for 2 people. YT's mom goes in, followed by the proctor, who closes and locks the door. YT's mom pulls down her pantyhose, pulls up her skirt, squats over a pan, pees. The proctor watches every drop go into the pan, picks it up, empties it into a test tube that is already labeled with her name and today's date. Then it's back out to the lobby, followed again by the proctor. You're allowed to use the elevators on your way to the polygraph room, so you won't be out of breath and sweaty just when you get there. It used to be just a plain office with a chair and some instruments on a table. Then they got the new, fancy polygraph system. Now it's like going in for some kind of high-tech medical scan. The room is completely rebuilt, no vestige of its original function. The window covered over, everything smooth and beige and smelling like a hospital. There's only one chair in the middle. YT's mom goes and sits down in it, puts her arms on the arms of the chair, nestles her fingertips and palms into the little depressions that await. The neoprene fist of the blood pressure cuff gropes blindly, finds her arm, and seizes it. Meanwhile, the room lights are dimming. The door is closing. She's all alone. The crown of thorns closes over her head. She feels the pricks of the electrodes through her scalp, senses the cool air flowing down over her shoulders from the superconducting quantum interference devices that serve as radar into her brain. Somewhere on the other side of the wall, she knows half a dozen personnel techs are sitting in a control room, looking at a big screen blow-up of her pupils. Then she feels a burning prick in her forearm and knows she's been injected with something, which means it's not a normal polygraph exam. Today, she's in for something special. The burning spreads throughout her body. Her heart thumps, eyes water. She's been shot up with caffeine to make her hyper, make her talkative. So much for getting any work done today. Sometimes these things go for 12 hours.
What is your name?
A voice says. It's an unnaturally calm and liquid voice, computer generated. That way, everything it says to her is impartial, stripped of emotional content. She has no way to pick up any cues as to how the interrogation is going. The caffeine, and the other things that they inject her with, screw up her sense of time also. She hates these things, but it happens to everyone from time to time, and when you go to work for the feds, you sign on the dotted line and give permission for it. In a way, it's a mark of pride and honor. Everyone who works for the feds has their heart in it, because if they didn't, it would come out plain as day when it is their turn to sit in this chair. The questions go on and on. Mostly nonsense questions.
Have you ever been to Scotland? Is white bread more expensive than wheat bread?
This is just to get her settled down, get all systems running smoothly. They throw out all the stuff they get from the first hour of the interrogation because it's lost in the noise. She can feel herself relaxing into it. They say that after a few polygraphs, you learn to relax, that the whole thing goes quicker. The chair holds her in place. The caffeine keeps her from getting drowsy. The sensory deprivation clears out her mind.
What is your daughter's nickname?
YT.
How do you refer to your daughter?
I call her by her nickname, YT. She kind of insists on it.
Does YT have a job?
Yes, she works as a courier. She works for Radix.
How much money does YT make as a courier?
I don't know, a few bucks here and there.
How often does she purchase new equipment for her job?
I'm not aware. I don't really keep track of that.
Has YT done anything unusual lately?
That depends on what you mean. She knows she's equivocating. She's always doing things that some people might label as unusual. That doesn't sound too good. Sounds like an endorsement of nonconformity. I guess what I'm saying is she's always doing unusual things.
Has YT broken anything in the house recently?
Yes. She gives up. The feds already know this. Her house is bugged and tapped. It's a wonder it doesn't short out the electrical grid, all the extra stuff wired into it. She broke my computer.
Did she give an explanation for why she broke the computer?
Yes, sort of. I mean, if nonsense counts as an explanation.
What was her explanation?
She was afraid. This is so ridiculous. She was afraid I was going to catch a virus from it.
Was YT also afraid of catching this virus?
No, she said that only programmers could catch it. Why are they asking her all of these questions? They have all this stuff on tape.
Do you believe YT's explanation of why she broke the computer?
That's it. That's what they're after. They want to know the only thing they can't directly tap, what's going on in her mind. They want to know whether she believes YT's virus story. And she knows that she's making a mistake just thinking these thoughts, because those super-cooled squids around her head are picking it up. They can't tell what she's thinking, but they can tell that something's going on in her brain, that she's using parts of her brain right now that she didn't use when they were asking the nonsense questions. In other words, they can tell that she is analyzing the situation, trying to figure them out, and she wouldn't be doing that unless she wanted to hide something. "What is it you want to know?" she says. "Why don't you just come out and ask me directly? Let's talk about this face to face.
Just sit down together in a room like adults and talk about it. She feels another sharp prick in her arm, feels numbness and coldness spreading all across her body over an interval of a couple of seconds as the drug mixes with her bloodstream. It's getting harder to follow the conversation. "What is your name?" the voice says. So yeah, YT's mom is in a bit of hot water, which means that the government probably knows about what's going on with El Bob Rife. Here we go. Where is the translation of squids? SQUIDs. They said it earlier. Where are you? Super something quantum hoobsy. Superconducting quantum interface devices. Squids. Superconducting quantum interface devices. Squid. SQUID. Z. Whatever those are. Brain readers, apparently. uh, moving right along now. Ah! Don't lose that. You need that. There we go. Okay. Sorry, just trying to get a good suck on this cough drop. As disgusting as that sounds. Chapter 39. The Alcan, the Alaska Highway, is the world's longest franchise ghetto, a one-dimensional city 2,000 miles long and 100 feet wide, and growing at the rate of 100 miles a year, or as quickly as people can drive up to the edge of the wilderness and park their bagos in the next available slot. It is the only way out for people who want to leave America but don't have access to an airplane or a ship. It's all two-lane, paved but not well paved, and choked with mobile homes, family vans, pickup trucks with camper backs. It starts somewhere in the middle of British Columbia, at the crossroads of Prince George, where a number of tributaries feed in together to make a single northbound highway. South of there, the tributaries split into a delta of feeder roads that crosses the Canadian/American border at a dozen or more places spread out over 500 miles from the fjords of British Columbia to the vast striped wheatlands of central Montana. Then it ties into the American road system, which serves as the headwaters of the migration. This 500-mile swath of territory is filled with would-be Arctic explorers in great wheeled houses, optimistically northbound, and more than a few rejects who have abandoned their bagos in the North Country and hitched a ride back down south. The lumbering bagos and top-heavy four-wheelers form a moving slalom course for Hiro on his black motorcycle. All these beefy Caucasians with guns. Get enough of them together, looking for the America they always believed they'd grow up in, and they glom together like overcooked rice, form integral, starchy little units. With their power tools, portable generators, weapons, four-wheel drive vehicles, and personal computers, they are like beavers hyped up on crystal meth. Manic engineers without a blueprint, chewing through the wilderness, building things and abandoning them, altering the flow of mighty rivers, and then moving on because the place ain't what it used to be.
The byproduct of the lifestyle is polluted rivers, greenhouse effect, spouse abuse, televangelists, and serial killers. But as long as you have that four-wheel drive vehicle and can keep driving north, you can sustain it, keep moving just quickly enough to stay one step ahead of your own waste stream. In 20 years, 10 million white people will converge on the North Pole and park their bagos there. The low-grade waste heat of their thermodynamically intense lifestyle will turn the crystalline icescape pliable and treacherous. It will melt a hole through the polar ice cap, and all that metal will sink to the bottom, sucking the biomass down with it. For a fee, you can drive into a Snoozin' Cruise franchise and umbilical your bago. The magic words are, "We have pull-throughs," which means you can enter the franchise, hook up, sleep, unhook, and drive out without ever having to shift your Land Zeppelin into reverse. They used to claim it was a campground, tried to design the franchise with a rustic motif, but the customers kept chopping up those log and plank signs and wooden picnic tables and using them for cooking fires. Nowadays, the signs are electric polycarbonate bubbles. The corporate identity is all round and polished and smooth, in the same way that a urinal is, to prevent stuff from building up in the cracks. Because it's not really camping when you don't have a house to go back to. 16 hours out of California, Hiro pulls into a Snoozin' Cruise on the eastern slope of the Cascades in northern Oregon. He's several hundred miles north of where the raft is, and on the wrong side of the mountains. But there's a guy here he wants to interview. There are 3 parking lots. One out of sight down a pitted dirt road marked with falling down signs. One a little bit closer, with scary Harrys hanging around its edges, silvery discs flashing and popping under the full moon as they aim the bottoms of their beer cans at the sky. And one right in front of the town hall, with gun-toting attendants. You have to pay to park in that lot. Hiro decides to pay. He leaves his bike pointing outward, puts the BIOS into warm shutdown so he can hot boot it later if he has to, throws some Kongbucks at an attendant. Then he turns his head back and forth like a hunting dog, sniffing the still air, trying to find the glade. There's an area a few hundred feet away, under the moonlight, where a few people have been adventurous enough to pitch a tent. Usually, these are the ones with the most guns, or the least to lose. Hiro goes in that direction, and pretty soon he can see the spreading canopy over the glade. Everyone else calls it the body lot. It is, simply, an open patch of ground, formerly grass-covered, now covered with successive truckloads of sand that have become mingled with litter, broken glass, and human waste. A canopy is stretched over it to keep out the rain, and big mushroom-shaped hoods stick out of the ground every few feet, exhaling warm air on cold nights. It is pretty cheap to sleep in the glade. It is an innovation that was created by some of the franchises farther south, and has been spreading northward along with its clientele. About half a dozen of them are scattered around under the warm air vents, bandaged against the chill in their army blankets. A couple of them have a small fire going, are playing cards by its light. Hiro ignores them, starts wandering around through the remainder. "Chuck Wrightson," he says. "Mr. President, are you here?" The second time he says it, a pile of wool off to his left begins to writhe and thrash around. A head comes out of it. Hiro turns toward him, holds up his hands to prove he's unarmed. "Who is that?" he says. He is abjectly terrified. "Raven?" "Not Raven," Hiro says. "Don't worry. Are you Chuck Wrightson, former president of the Temporary Republic of Kenai and Kodiak?" "Yeah. What do you want? I don't have any money." "Just to talk. I work for CIC, and my job is to gather intelligence." "I need a fucking drink," Chuck Wrightson says. The town hall is a big inflatable building in the middle of the Snoozin' Cruise. It is derelict Las Vegas. Convenience store, video arcade, laundromat, bar, liquor store, flea market, whorehouse. It always seems to be ruled by that small percentage of the human population that is capable of partying until 5 in the morning every single night, and that has no other function. Most town halls have a few franchises within franchises. Hiro sees a Kelly's Tap, which is about the nicest trough you are likely to find at a snoozin' cruise, and leads Chuck Wrightson into it. Chuck is wearing many layers of clothing that used to be different colors. Now they are the same color as his skin, which is khaki. All the businesses in a town hall, including this bar, look like something you'd see on a prison ship. Everything nailed down, brightly lit up 24 hours a day, all of the personnel sealed up behind thick glass barriers that have gone all yellow and murky. Security at this town hall is provided by the Enforcers, so there are a lot of steroid addicts in black armor gel outfits, cruising up and down the arcade in twos and threes, enthusiastically violating people's human rights. Hiro and Chuck grab the closest thing they can find to a corner table. Hiro buttonholes a waiter and surreptitiously orders a pitcher of pub special, mixed half and half with non-alcoholic beer. This way, Chuck ought to remain awake a little longer than he would otherwise. It doesn't take much to make him open up. He's like one of these old guys from a disgraced presidential administration, forced out by scandal, who devotes the rest of his life to finding people who will listen to him. Yeah, I was president of TROKK for 2 years. Trock. And I still consider myself the president of the government in exile. Heroes tries to keep himself from rolling his eyes. Chuck seems to notice. Okay, so that's not much. But Trock was a thriving country for a while. There's a lot of people who'd like to see something like that rise again. I mean, the only thing that forced us out, the only way those maniacs were able to seize power, was just totally. He doesn't seem to have words for it. How could you have expected something like that? How were you forced out? Was there a civil war? There were some uprisings early on, and there were remote parts of Kodiak where we never had a firm grip on power. Well, there was never a civil war per se. See, the Americans liked our government. The Americans had all the weapons, the equipment, the infrastructure. The Orthos were a bunch of hairy guys running around in the woods. Orthos? Russian Orthodox. At first they were a tiny minority, mostly Indians, Tlingits and Aleuts who'd been converted by the Russians hundreds of years ago. But when things got crazy in Russia, they started to pour across the date line in all kinds of different boats. And they didn't want a constitutional democracy. No way. What did they want? A Tsar? Nah, those Tsar guys, the traditionalists, stayed in Russia. The Orthos who came to Trock were total rejects. They had been forced out by the mainline Russian Orthodox Church. Why? Heretic. That's how Russians say heretic. The Orthos who came to Trock were a new sect, all Pentecostals. They were tied in somehow with the Reverend Wayne's pearly gates. We had missionaries from Texas coming up all the goddamn time to meet with them. They were always speaking in tongues. The mainline Russian Orthodox Church thought it was the work of the devil. So, how many of these Pentecostal Russian Orthodox people came over to Trock? Geez, a hell of a lot of them. At least 50,000. How many Americans were in Trock? Close to 100,000. Then how exactly did the Orthos manage to take the place over? Well, one morning we woke up and there was an Airstream parked in the middle of Government Square in New Washington, right in the middle of all the bagos where we had set up the government. The Orthos had towed it there during the night and then took the wheels off so it couldn't be moved. We figured it was a protest action, so we told them to move it out of there. They refused and issued a proclamation in Russian. When we got this damn thing translated, it turned out to be an order for us to pack up and leave and turn over power to the Orthos. Well, this was ridiculous. So we went up to this Airstream to move it out of there, and Gurov's waiting for us with his nasty grin on his face. Gurov? Yeah, one of the refuse who came over the date line from the Soviet Union.
Former KGB general turned religious fanatic. He was kind of like the Minister of Defense for the government that the Orthos set up. So Gurov opens the side door of the Airstream and lets us get a load of what's inside.
What was inside?
Well, mostly it was a bunch of equipment, a portable generator, electrical wiring, a control panel, and so forth. But in the middle of the trailer, there's this big black cone sitting on the floor, about the shape of an ice cream cone, except it's about 5 feet long and it's smooth and black. And I asked, what the hell is that thing? And Gurov says, that thing is a 10 megaton hydrogen bomb we scavenged from a ballistic missile. A city buster. Any more questions?
So you capitulated.
Couldn't do much else.
Do you know how the Orthos came to be in possession of a hydrogen bomb? Chuck Wrightson clearly knows. He sucks in his deepest breath of the evening, lets it out, shakes his head, staring off over Hiro's shoulder. He takes a couple of nice long swigs from his glass of beer.
There was a Soviet nuclear missile submarine. The commander was named Ovchinnikov. He was religiously faithful, but he wasn't a fanatic like the Orthos. I mean, if he had been a fanatic, they wouldn't have given him some command of a nuclear missile submarine, right?
Supposedly.
You had to be psychologically stable, whatever that means. Anyway, after things fell apart in Russia, he found himself in possession of this very dangerous weapon. He made up his mind that he was going to offload all of the crew and then scuttle it in the Marianas Trench. Bury all those weapons forever. But somehow he was persuaded to use this submarine to help a bunch of the Orthos escape to Alaska. They, and a lot of other refuse, had started flocking to the Bering coast, and the conditions in some of these refugee camps were pretty desperate. And it's not like a lot of food can be grown in that area. These people were dying by the thousands. They just stood on the beaches, starving to death, waiting for a ship to come. So Ovchinnikov lets himself be persuaded to use his submarine, which is very large and very fast, to evacuate some of those poor refuse to Trok. But, naturally, he was paranoid about the idea of letting a whole bunch of unknown quantities onto his ship. These nuke subcommanders are real security freaks, for obvious reasons. So they set up a very strict system. All the refuse who were going to get on the ship had to pass through metal detectors, had to be inspected. Then they were under armed guard all the way across to Alaska. Well, the stern Orthos have this guy named Raven.
I'm familiar with him.
Well, Raven got onto that nuclear submarine.
Oh my God.
He got over to the Siberian coast somehow, probably surfed across in his fucking kayak.
Surfed?
That's how the Aleuts get between islands.
Raven's an Aleut?
Yeah, an Aleut whale killer. You know what an Aleut is?
Yeah, my dad knew one in Japan, Hiro says.
A bunch of Dad's old prison camp tales are beginning to stir in Hiro's memory, working their way up out of deep, deep storage.
The Aleuts just paddle out in their kayaks and catch a wave. They can outrun a steamship.
Didn't know that.
Anyway, Raven went to one of these refugee camps and passed himself off as a Siberian tribesman. You can't tell some of those Siberians apart from our Indians. The Orthos apparently had some Confederates in these camps who bumped Raven up to the head of the line, so he got to be on the submarine.
But you said there was a metal detector.
Didn't help. He uses glass knives, chips them out of plate glass. It's the sharpest blade in the universe.
Didn't know that either.
Yeah, the edge is only a single molecule wide. Doctors use them for eye surgery. They can cut into your cornea and not leave a scar. There's Indians who make a living doing that, chipping out eye scalpels.
Well, you learn something new every day. That kind of a knife would be sharp enough to go through bulletproof fabric, I guess, Hiro says. Chuck Wrightson shrugs.
I lost track of the number of people Raven snuffed who were wearing bulletproof fabric.
Hiro says,
I thought he must be carrying some kind of high-tech laser knife or something. Think again. Glass knife. He had one on board the submarine. Either smuggled it on board with him or else found a chunk of glass on the submarine and chipped it out himself.
And Chuck gets his 1,000-yard stare again, takes another slug of beer. On a sub, there's no place for things to drain to. The survivors claim that the blood was knee-deep all through the submarine. Raven just killed everyone. Everyone except the orthos, a skeleton crew, and some other refuse who were able to barricade themselves in little compartments around the ship. The survivors say, Chuck says, taking another swig, that it was quite a night. And he forced them to steer the submarine into the hands of the orthos. To their anchorage off Kodiak, Chuck says. The orthos were all ready. They had put together a crew of ex-Navy men, guys who had worked on nuke subs in the past. X-rays, they call them. And they came and took the sub over. As for us, we had no idea that any of this had happened until one of the warheads showed up in our goddamn front yard. Chuck glances above Hiro's head, noticing something, noticing someone. Hiro feels a light tap on his shoulder. "Excuse me, sir," a man is saying. "Pardon me for just a second." And so the legend of Raven grows. Based on the incident that happened earlier in the book, Raven going onto a nuke sub and literally murdering everyone in it by hand is about right. The dude is a friggin' Terminator. He's a beast. He's a terrifying individual. He's great. Excuse me. Ugh. Yes, hack and cough into the microphone. That'll make everyone happy. I am just sure of it. Alrighty. Alright. This will probably be my last chapter for the day. Which gets us to the point where it'll probably be like, I don't know, 3 more sessions maybe? Or 4, 4, maybe 5, worst case. More sessions and this book will be done. Okay. One more slug of water here. Chapter 40. Hiro turns around. It's a big, porky white man with a wavy, slicked-back red hair and a beard. He's got a baseball cap perched on top of his head, tilted way back to expose the following words, tattooed in block letters across his forehead. Mood swings. Racially insensitive. Okay, so this gets nasty. Hiro is looking up at all of this over the curving horizon of the man's flannel-clad belly. "What is it?" Hiro says. "Well, sir, I'm sorry to disturb you in the middle of your conversation with this gentleman here, but me and my friends were just wondering, are you a lazy, shiftless, watermelon-eating black-ass nigger or a sneaky little VD-infected gook?" The man reaches up, pulls the brim of his baseball cap downward. Now Hiro can see the Confederate flag printed on the front, the embroidered words, New South Africa Franchulette number 153. Hiro pushes himself up over the table, spins around, and slides backward on his ass toward Chuck, trying to get the table between him and the New South African. Chuck has conveniently vanished, so Hiro ends up standing with his back comfortably to the wall, looking out over the bar. At the same time, a dozen or so other men are standing up from their tables, forming up behind the first one in a grinning, sunburned phalanx of Confederate flags and sideburns. "Let's see," Hiro says. "Is that some kind of a trick question?" There are a lot of town halls in a lot of Snooze and Cruise franchises where you have to check your weapons at the entrance. This is not one of them.
Hiro isn't sure if that is bad or good. Without weapons, the new South Africans would just beat the crap out of him. With weapons, Hiro can fight back, but the stakes are higher. Hiro is bulletproof up to his neck, but that just means the new South Africans will all be going for a headshot. And they pride themselves on marksmanship. It is a fetish with them. Isn't there an NSA franchise down the road? Hiro says.
Yeah,
Says the point man, who has a long, spreading body and short, stumpy legs.
it's heaven. It really is. Ain't no place on earth like a new South Africa.
Well, then if you don't mind my asking, Hiro says, if it's so damn nice, why don't you all go back to your egg sack and hang out there?
There's one problem with new South Africa,
The guy says.
don't mean to sound unpatriotic, but it's true.
And what is that problem? Hiro says.
There's no niggers, gooks, or kikes there to beat the shit out of.
Ah, that is a problem, Hiro says. Thank you.
For what?
For announcing your intentions, giving me the right to do this. Then Hiro cuts his head off. What else can he do? There are at least 12 of them. They have made a point of blocking the only exit. They have just announced their intentions. And, presumably, they are all carrying heat. Besides, this kind of thing is going to happen to him about every 10 seconds when he's on the raft. The new South African has no idea what's coming, but he starts to react when Hiro is swinging the katana at his neck, so he is flying backward when the decapitation occurs. That is good, because about half his blood supply comes lofting out of the top of his neck. Twin jets, one from each carotid. Hiro doesn't get a drop on himself. In the metaverse, the blade just passes right through, if you swing it quickly enough. Here in reality, Hiro is expecting a powerful shock when his blade hits the new South African's neck, like when you hit a baseball the wrong way, but he hardly feels a thing. It just goes right through and almost swings around and buries itself in the wall. He must have gotten lucky and hit a gap between vertebrae. Hiro's training comes back to him, oddly. He forgot to squeeze it off, forgot to stop the blade himself, and that's bad form. Even though he's expecting it, he's startled for a minute. This sort of thing doesn't happen with avatars. They just fall down. For an astonishingly long time, he just stands there and looks at the guy's body. Meanwhile, the airborne cloud of blood is seeking its level, dripping from the hung ceiling, spattering down from shelves behind the bar. A wino sitting there nursing a double shot of vodka shakes and shivers, staring into his glass at the galactic swirl of 1,000,000,000,000 red cells dying in the ethanol. Hiro swaps a few long glances with the new South Africans, like everyone in the bar is trying to come to a consensus as to what will happen next. Should they laugh? Take a picture? Run away? Call an ambulance? He makes his way around toward the exit by running across people's tables. It is rude, but other patrons scoot back. Some of them are quick enough to snatch their beers out of his way, and no one gives him any hassles. The sight of the bare katana inspires everyone to a practically Nipponese level of politeness. Hiro's just way out, but not because they want to stop anyone. Oh, whoops. There are a couple more. Here we go. The sight of the bare katana inspires everyone to a practically Nipponese level of politeness. There are a couple more new South Africans blocking Hiro's way out, but not because they want to stop anyone. It's just where they happen to be standing when they go into shock. Hiro decides, reflexively, not to kill them. And Hiro is off into the lurid main avenue of the town hall. A tunnel of flickering and pulsating low glow through which black creatures sprint like benighted sperm up the old fallopians, sharp angular things clenched in their hands. They are the enforcers. They make the average meta-cop look like Ranger Rick. Gargoyle time. Hiro switches everything on. Infrared, millimeter wave radar, ambient sound processing. The infrared doesn't do much in these circumstances, but the radar picks out all the weapons, highlights them in the enforcer's hands, identifies them by make, model, and ammunition type. They're all fully automatic.
But the enforcers and the New South Africans don't need radar to see Hiro's katana with blood and spinal fluid running down the blade. The music of Vitally Chernobyl and the Meltdowns is blasting through bad speakers all around him. It is their first single to hit the Billboard charts, entitled My Heart is a Smoking Hole in the Ground. The ambient sound processing cuts it to a more reasonable level, evens out the nasty distortion from the speakers so that he can hear his roommates singing more clearly, which it makes it all particularly surreal. It just goes to show that he's out of his element, doesn't belong here, lost in the biomass. If there was any justice, he could jump into those speakers and trace up the wires like a digital sylph, followed the grid back to LA where he belongs, there on top of the world, where everything comes from. Buy Vitaly a drink, crawl into his futon. He stumbles forward helplessly as something terrible happens to his back. It feels like being massaged with 100 ball-peen hammers. At the same time, a yellow sputtering light overrides the low glow. A screaming red display flashes up on the goggles, informing him that the millimeter wave radar has noticed a stream of bullets headed in his direction. And would you like to know where they came from, sir? Hiro has just been shot in the back with a burst of machine gun fire. All of the bullets have slapped into his vest and dropped to the floor, but in doing so, they have cracked about half of the ribs on that side of his body and bruised a few internal organs. He turns around, which hurts. The enforcer has given up on bullets and whipped out another weapon. It says so right on Hiro's goggles. Pacific Enforcement Hardware Incorporated Model SX29 Restraint Projection Device, Loogie Gun, which is what he should have used in the first place. You can't just carry a sword around as an empty threat. You shouldn't draw it or keep it drawn unless you intend to kill someone. Hiro runs toward the enforcer, raising the katana to strike. The enforcer does the proper thing, namely, gets the hell out of the way. The silver ribbon of the katana shines up above the crowd. It attracts enforcers and repels everyone else. So as Hiro runs down the center of the town hall, he has no one in front of him and many shiny dark creatures behind him. He turns off all the techno shit in his goggles. All it does is confuse him. He stands there reading statistics about his own death even as it's happening to him. Very postmodern. Time to get immersed in reality, like all the people around him. Not even enforcers will fire their big guns in a crowd, unless it's point-blank range, or they're in a really bad mood. A few loogies shoot past Hiro, already so spread out as to be nothing more than an annoyance, and splat into bystanders, wrapping them in sticky gossamer veils. Somewhere between the 3D video game arcade and the display window full of terminally bored prostitutes, Hiro's eyes clear up and he sees a miracle. The exit of the inflatable dome, where the doors exhale a breeze of synthetic beer breath and atomized body fluids into the cool night air. Bad things and good things are happening in quick succession. The next bad thing happens when a steel grate falls down to block the doors. What the hell? It's an inflatable building. Hiro turns on the radar just for a moment, and the walls seem to drop away and become invisible. He's seeing through them now, into the forest of steel outside. It doesn't take long to locate the parking lot where he left his bike, supposedly under the protection of some armed attendants. Hiro fakes toward the whorehouse, then cuts directly toward an exposed section of wall. The fabric of the building is tough, but his katana slices a 6-foot rent through it with a single gliding motion, and then he's outside, spat out of the hole on a jet of fetid air. After that, after Hiro gets onto his motorcycle, and the New South Africans get into their all-terrain pickups, and the enforcers get into their slick black enforcer mobiles, sorry, and they all go screaming out onto the highway. After that, it's just a chase scene. So, there we have Hiro, protagonist, being a bit of a badass. Taking very little shit indeed. 100% done, and just straight up ended that man's life. Well, he was going to beat him to a pulp. So, decapitation for you. So, for some background for those just tuning in, Hero protagonist is in fact a mixed race individual. So that entire scene was able to happen because his dad was a black Navy Marine who had a Japanese wife, and thus Hiro was born. And Hiro inherited a sword that his father got, I think, from a POW camp or killing. Yeah, he got it from killing a Japanese officer at the time. Crunch. And so Hiro has inherited it and knows how to use it. He actually has two of them, I think. In any event, so as a little bit of background on the book, it was written in or published in 1992, so it predates a lot of the really edgy stuff you get nowadays, and in the intervening years, and influenced most of it, and is generally just a whole lot of ridiculous silliness like that. So there is more of that to come. It gets fairly crazy by the end. Fairly crazy indeed. We haven't even gotten to the showdown between Hero and Raven yet. And you bet there's a showdown. You bet. It goes down. All right. So with that, I do have to call it a day. I do this every Saturday at the same time, about noon Eastern Standard. Um, I also have other streams throughout the week. I've got a Mecha Mondays stream where I do something mecha related or adjacent. I have a Warframe Wednesdays stream where I do something Warframe related. And then I have my Storytime Saturday stream. I am Fragath. I have been your narrator for today. I hope you enjoyed, and there is still much more of this book to come, and hope you tune in. Thank you very much. Have a good one.